enforcing an immigrant wealth test. In her dissent, Sotomayor said cases involving the Trump administration are being rushed through lower courts. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Markets. Looking right now at those markets, we are seeing a sell-off. The S&P down 0.6%. And Paul, we really noticed a market turnaround from what had been a positive start to the day.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, it looks like we're seeing some reporting of some cases, now not just Italy, but perhaps Spain as well. And so I think that just raises the concerns that a lot of investors have about how much of a potential is this to be a global pandemic, which could impact global GDP. And I think that's kind of the risk we're seeing in the bond market, yields grinding lower, and then the equity market's rolling over here.
Yeah, this is just to be very clear. The WHO the World Health Organization has not deemed this yet a pandemic. It is required that an international agency like that give it that designation. However, we are seeing it spread beyond the borders of China and Japan and Korea and Italy now to Switzerland, which is confirmed, and also reports in Spain as well. The question is, do you buy this dip? And Jim Paulson, Chief Investment Strategist at Luthold Group, has been watching closely and joins us now on the phone. Jim, do you buy here?
Well, I think if you've been underweighted dramatically, you might want to buy a little bit. But otherwise, I think I'd stand pat here and let the fear sort of burn itself out here for a few more days. I think the coronavirus was the catalyst here, but I think this market would have found some catalyst. I mean, we've just had a tremendous run over the last year, and really we have not had a 10% correction. We certainly could have here. Who knows? And that would not be at all, surprising. It probably at some point would have found some catalyst to do that. And when you have these steep drops, the fear really escalates and the stories get pretty scary. And personally, who knows? I'm no pandemic expert by any means, so it could be a horrific outcome. I don't really know, but odds, I think, strongly favor that probably this epidemic will start to fade a little bit here over the next several months, and probably a lot of the spending that has been paused because of this, like in places like China, will catch up. And I still think that's the most likely outcome. It's not shocking to me that we have incidents in other parts of the world. Heck, we had, long before last week, we had incidents here in the United States and several other places in the world. So we knew it was spreading. I'll be surprised, though, to some extent, if it gets nearly as bad elsewhere as it did in China, simply because China, that was the outbreak and no one really knew what it was, and no one expected that it was as bad as it was. Everywhere knows what this is from a standpoint that it's serious, and before it even gets bad, they've taken measures. I think that makes a difference, where people have some warning to this as opposed to when it broke in China. Who knows? But you never know these things. But I think underneath this, going into this coronavirus, we had an uptick in world economic growth. Manufacturing was recovering around the world. Growth in general was recovering. We had our ISM back above 50. We had the ISM in China pop back above 50. Right now, economic surprises have been on the positive side in most places around the world, including China, the emerging world, and in the United States. So we had positive momentum going into this, which I think is a very good thing, as opposed to negative year if this hit. Yeah, I certainly don't know, but I would try to avoid, panicking here. I think this will is more a correction than the end of the cycle.
Just to give you an update, right now, all three major U.S. equity indices down nearly 1% as Spain isolates 1,000 people at an island hotel with the concern that there could be the spread of coronavirus. Switzerland confirming its first case. Meanwhile, you're seeing in the bond market 30-year yields down to new lows of 1.8%, 1.798% now, actually. You're seeing rate cut bets increasing, with a lot of people speculating the Fed could cut rates 3 times by the beginning of next year.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go, Lisa. Jim, what do you think the Fed should do, could do in response to some of the concerns of the coronavirus?
Well, if the market continues to go down, I think the Fed will probably come in and with a rate cut.
What does that do, though?
Well, I think it doesn't do much directly fundamentally than we've already done, but I think it does help confidence to some degree. One thing it would do is help take the inversion out of the yield curve, which would help Wall Street confidence to some degree, I think. I also think, Lisa, that in many ways, the coronavirus is, the undercenter of the story here. That's the narrative. I really think a big part of what's going on is the bond market, and the fact that the 30-year yield broke to new lows last week, and the 10-year is doing so now or is very close. I think that's scaring a lot of traders and investors more even than the coronavirus is the breakdown in yields. What does the bond market know that the stock market doesn't? And if yields break below those levels, are yields in the United States headed negative?
Here's the sort of conundrum, right? A lot of people say that the lower yields go on bonds in the United States, the more of a relative valuation case there is for equities, and yet there is this sort of confidence factor where if bond yields head south, price up, yield down, especially at these levels, it indicates a flight to safety and a fear trade that makes people risk averse. So which is it, right? I mean, which signal can you get that you're getting a better relative valuation in equities the lower the yields go, or that the bond market is telling you something kind of scary that should keep you away from risk assets?
Well, the bond market's been telling us, something scary for really since the end of 2018. And it's also told us something scary in 2016, and it also told us something scary in 2011 and 2013. I mean, the bond market's been telling a scary story throughout this bull market, and it hasn't really been right in a lot of those. Now, it could be right at some point. There's no doubt about that. But the fact that we got a scary story coming from the stock market is nothing new in the last decade, where it's been perpetually setting new lows and suggesting something sinister is underneath the surface. And we're doing that again. But, we did that at the end of the last manufacturing recession in 2016 as well. And the yields are about where they were, and falling at this point then as well. So it's hard to know. I mean, the bond market could be right. I'm not saying that, but it's not like this is a one-off event that's never happened before. The bond market's been, yelling fire for quite some time. And who knows who is right? I just think it connotes fear more than anything else right now. And to me, I wouldn't necessarily run from that. I'm not sure I'd buy into it. Let's see a few days, see if this can find a bottom. But I wouldn't necessarily panic along with everyone else.
Hey, Jim, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts and commentary. Jim Paulson, Chief Investment Strategist for the Luthold Group, joining us on the phone from Minneapolis. Lisa, I'm just looking at the cruise lines, and I'm looking at Norwegian Cruise Lines, Royal Caribbean, and Carnival, all hitting 52-week lows today. So clearly, it is the travel industry, certainly getting hit extremely hard. Yeah,
and this comes after Spanish authorities isolated guests and workers at a hotel in the Canary Islands after an Italian tourist there initially tested positive for the coronavirus. This comes as there is growing fear that it is hard to contain this virus, given the fact that it is highly contagious and contagious sometimes before the symptoms show up. I believe that health officials have seen some instances of that, and some people don't necessarily display significant symptoms beyond a common cold.
Yeah, I'm just punching up the airlines as well, Lisa. Similar story there. American Airlines hitting 52-week lows, seeing the airlines off about 3 to 4% today at across the board. So travel clearly on the front lines here from investor standpoint.
I think what Jim said is salient, which is how much is this due to the coronavirus and how much is this an excuse simply to sell?
Yeah, exactly. Because we were hitting all-time highs prior to this, and investors and strategists were calling for some type of pullback. Here's the catalyst. This is Bloomberg.
We can't always tell, but 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. So when we're all heads down, stampeding and charging because we're late for the bus or train, we could be doing more harm than we think. So let's not forget about the people we share our journeys with. Let's slow down a bit. Remember, it's everyone's journey.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge, wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches...
Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, Turnaround Tuesday turning into Sell-Off Tuesday as all major equity indices go lower. Also looking at the small cap shares headed even lower, talking about that underperformance coming up. Plus, we'll take a look at China's economy in the wake of the spread of the virus, as well as its healthcare response. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Stocks are down, as we've been talking about not all morning long. They started out in the green. The S&P's now on pace for its biggest four-day slump since December of 2018 as investors weigh the latest coronavirus developments. Treasuries are up. Simon French, Panmure Gordon, chief economist, tells Bloomberg emerging markets are particularly at risk now.
Even if some of the economic activity deferred from H1 in China comes back at H2, some of it, a lot of the discretionary activity, particularly around the Lunar New Year, won't, and therefore a more material hit to China, to emerging markets.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 0.7%, down 23. It's a bit of a comeback. The Dow's down 0.75%, down 204, and the NASDAQ is also down 0.75%, down 68. The 10-year is up 11.30 seconds. The yield is 1.33%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.3% at $50.74 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 1.2% at $16.5620 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 110.16. The euro, $1.865, and the British pound, $1.30.17. Cornerstone on-demand shares sank after the human resources software developer posted mixed fourth quarter results and announced plans to acquire competitor Saba Software for about $1.4 billion. Cornerstone on-demand is down 29.2%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa and Paul.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number one in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. Again, we thought we were going to be able to hold some gains this morning. The market at the opening tried to rally a little bit, put a little stability back into the marketplace, but we have since rolled over. To get a sense of what's going on in the world of small caps, we welcome Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, how are they faring there?
Not well. I mean, you've got the Russell 2000 index down 1.5%, and the S&P 500 is only lower by 0.9%. And taking a look at the Russell, it's now at a 3-month low. And if you put it together with yesterday's loss, it may be headed for the biggest drop since 2018. Whether it's December or February, we'll find out later, but not good. Let's put it that way. The Russell's steepest drop belongs to a company we talked about last hour, Tupperware Brands, the ticker TUP. The household product maker has lost 40%. Preliminary earnings for last year were well below estimates, and the company disclosed an accounting probe down in Mexico. Kratos Defense and Security, ticker KTOS, has fallen almost 14%. The story there is that earnings, the military contractor, trailed analyst average estimate in the Bloomberg survey for the first time in about 4 years. You also had disappointing results out of Shake Shack, ticker SHAK. That stock lower at the moment by 12.5%, reporting for their fourth quarter. And sales at Shake Shack came up short of estimates. They were hurt by a shift toward a single company for delivery, Grubhub, rather than working with more than one. And in terms of what's higher in the Russell, biggest gain right now belongs to a company called Arlo Technologies. The ticker is ARLO. It's up 26.5%. The maker of home monitoring software posted a narrow loss and higher revenue for the fourth quarter than analysts expected. And Mallinckrodt, ticker MNK, is up 23%. The drug maker agreed to pay $1.6 billion to settle claims related to the U.S. opioid crisis.
Dave, before I let you go, just remind me why it makes sense that an international issue like the spread of the coronavirus is causing a steeper sell-off in small cap shares, which should be potentially, theoretically, more hinged to the U.S. economy than large caps, which are more hinged to the global economy.
Well, I mean, you have to consider what's ahead for the U.S. economy at this point, given the issues that we know are out there in terms of supplies from China, in terms of sales to China. And it's not just China at this point. You have to think about what's going on around the world. And, on top of that, I mean, if you're in a situation where people don't want to take risk, smaller companies are often perceived as riskier. So if you're going to stick with anything here, more than likely it's the larger companies rather than the smaller ones.
Dave Wilson, a Bloomberg Stocks editor, perfectly setting up our next guest, because this sort of raises a question. Is the U.S. in a weaker position than a lot of people think it is? A lot of people saying that it's much more resilient to the spread of this virus than other nations, based on location, based on supply chains, as well as the healthcare system that's in place. Joining us now to talk about the consumer, which has been the stalwart of the economy, is Lynn Franco, Senior Director of Economic Indicators and Surveys at the Conference Board, and talking about the consumer. They're really still confident. The U.S. consumer confidence reading edged up in February to the best level in 6 months. I'm just wondering, Lynn, understandably this is backward looking, but was there any commentary about the spread of the coronavirus or a fear of a subsequent slowdown in the U.S.?
Not really, not at the moment anyway. I think, as this sort of unfolds, and now it seems to have spread, beyond the borders of China, it could have a negative impact on consumer confidence. And then the question becomes, does that negative impact then cause a curtailment in spending, which then would have a negative impact on the U.S. economy?
So, Lynn, what are some of the data points in your work that you're going to really pay attention to see if that is beginning to happen?
I think we're going to really keep an eye on what happens in terms of the present situation. I mean, we had a bit of a decline in February, but still relatively strong. Consumers' expectations, looking ahead right now, actually improved. So it doesn't seem that they're, troubled. So we'll keep an eye on both over the coming months. But for now, it looks like the consumer is pretty much holding steady and will continue to support growth in the U.S. economy.
What was the main driver of the ongoing improvement in confidence?
Well, they expect the business conditions to improve over the next 6 months and employment as well. So that continues to be sort of the major support pillar of consumer confidence. And we've seen a little bit of a pickup, in auto purchase intentions. It looks like housing remains strong as well. But again, this is sort of the early days of the coronavirus. So we'll keep a careful eye on what happens over the next couple of weeks to see if, consumers are going to be able to sort of weather the storm or whether it's going to have an impact.
Lynn Franco, thanks so much for joining us. Lynn Franco, Director of Economic Indicators for the Conference Board on their Consumer Confidence Index. Still fairly healthy. Still, Lisa, showing that the consumer, at least at this point, remains fairly confident. But when you get more days like yesterday and today in the financial markets, that may change somewhat.
To me, it raises still another question about why the Federal Reserve would cut rates or the efficacy of such Fed action. Because if the idea here is to embolden the consumer and give them more confidence to go out and borrow and spend, it seems like they are fairly confident at this point, although there is a question, particularly to the former Fed chair, former Fed president of Minneapolis, Kojo Lakota. What he was saying is it would preemptively prevent people from getting less confident.
Yeah. It's an interesting column. It's a thought-provoking column. I think it's certainly useful for the conversation. But as Ira Jersey was suggesting to us, it's really unclear whether if an additional rate cut or two in the face of this exogenous risk would really do much for the economy. But that is, potentially a school of thought. But
in the meantime, I really think what Dave Wilson was talking about, the persistent underperformance of small and mid-cap shares, to me, it has always traditionally been a warning sign, and yet this time around people are dismissing it as these companies just happen to be more leveraged or they're just riskier.
Right.
It's not squaring perfectly.
You're right, and you bring up a good point when you talk about the small caps, which is theoretically they're less exposed to the global GDP and global exogenous events, so therefore shouldn't they be a little bit more immune, but that's not playing out in the markets. And again, I'm looking at the indices here, all down north of 1%, and we'll get the update going forward. We'll have more for you. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
And Paul, the latest update on the spread of the coronavirus is that Switzerland is reporting its first case in a town near the border of Italy, where close to 300 people have come down with an infection that continues to spread in Asia as well. Bloomberg's Selena Wang reports from Beijing.
South Korea has now become the worst affected country after China. More than 900 infections there and now 9 reported deaths. The U.S., Japan, and Hong Kong have all issued travel warnings to the country. And Singapore is now going to ban all short-term visitors with recent travel history to the center of the outbreak in South Korea.
President Trump says the U.S. has it under control as he asks for emergency funding.
$2.5 billion we're putting in. I see that Chuck Schumer criticized that he thought it should be more. And if I gave more, he'd say it should be less.
The president spoke from India as his administration defends proposed cuts to health care in the White House budget request. Republican Senator Roy Blunt.
We're not likely to cut health care research, and I hope we can continue our pattern of increasing health care research at this incredible time.
And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is criticizing China and Iran's response, saying suppression of information may be making the outbreak worse. Democrats head into tonight's presidential debate in South Carolina, looking to blunt Bernie Sanders' momentum. At a CNN town hall last night, he pushed back at worries about his electability.
If you look at just polls that came out a few days ago on Sunday, I think it was CBS, I am beating Trump in Michigan, beating Trump in Pennsylvania, beating Trump in Wisconsin. I think we're tied in Florida.
You can hear tonight's debate in South Carolina on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Boston, and Washington, beginning at 8 tonight, Wall Street time. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts around the world.
Our relationship with Asia is simple. Find the most experienced journalists.
These countries will need each other more and more in the future.
Let them gather the best data and experts.
Let's get to Singapore now and our guest.
Then bring everything they find straight to you.
Let's talk about where you are. There's quite a lot of headwinds there too.
Actually, it's not simple. It's just better. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative, and that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Discover Ireland's wild Atlantic way with Aer Lingus. Fly London to the west of Ireland from $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. Enjoy breathtaking scenery, taste fresh seafood, and explore wild coastal walks. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
What am I saving for? My passion. Food photography.
I trained to be a landscape garden designer.
Open a food stall and sell my famous fish tacos.
I go to stuntman school.
I'd be a wedding planner. I'd start a dog grooming business.
Sorry, we'd start a dog grooming business.
What are you waiting for? Make your one day happen with a Fidelity Stocks and Shares ISA. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules may change. Full terms for our stocks and shares ISA are available on our website, 18 plus UK residents.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
It's not always obvious, but 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. So if we're sitting in the priority seats on the bus or train, lost in our books or wrapped up in the latest box set, let's not forget about the people we share our journeys with. Let's pop out of our shells every now and then and ask if someone needs that seat more than us. Remember, it's everyone's journey.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game.
Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down in choppy trading, wiping out the initial gains we saw at the open. Fears about the economic impact of the coronavirus epidemic are keeping investors on edge. In fact, all 11 sectors of the S&P have headed south. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 1.4%, down 43. Dow's down 1.3%, down 350, and the Nasdaq's down 1.5%, down 134. The 10-year is up 14.30 seconds with a yield of 1.32%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.75% at $50.53 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 1.2% at $16.5620 an ounce. The dollar yen 110.09. The euro's $1.878 and the British pound $1.3013. Chinatowns across the world are taking it from the coronavirus, from New York to San Francisco to Sydney. And even though they may be thousands of miles away from the epicenter of China's coronavirus outbreak, people are not visiting, to the point that Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives, walked the streets of San Francisco's Chinatown last night to prove that she's not afraid and invite people to help the businesses. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, one of the key issues that the coronavirus is really raising is the state of the healthcare system in China. How well equipped is China to deal with health issues such as the coronavirus? And our next guest has a unique perspective on that. Andy Brown, editorial director for Bloomberg New Economy, joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. And he just wrote a fantastic column, which you can find on the terminal and on Bloomberg.com/opinion.
Tear-jerking.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's really powerful. So, Andy, give us a sense of kind of what you put into this column here, kind of, and how it shaped kind of your view of the healthcare system in China.
Yeah, so this was back in 2005 when China's healthcare system was in a state of complete disrepair after many years of neglect. And I wanted to find out what happened to a poor Chinese family when it was struck by what they call da bing, big sickness. And so I found a 7-year-old kid who was suffering from leukemia in the Beijing Children's Hospital. And I followed the family. The mother, who was in the hospital, camped out there every day, having to settle the bills. Dad, who was back at home in a poor Chinese village, selling off all of the family's possessions in order to try to, get enough money to keep his son in intensive care. And in the end, he sold everything, and there was nothing more to sell. Dad went back to Beijing. He and the mother went into the emergency ward, literally lifted their son off the bed, and his immune system at that point, of course, was completely shattered. He was in the middle of treatment, chemotherapy treatment, and they walked out of the hospital to take their son home to die. So the point of the column was to say that in many ways the healthcare system in China has improved since then quite dramatically. So 95% of the Chinese population have some form of health care. But in many other ways, the situation hasn't changed at all. And one of the problems in the Chinese healthcare system is that they don't really have general practitioners, or there is an acute shortage of general practitioners. These are the doctors at the front lines of preventative healthcare. So if you're sick in China, wherever you are in China, urban area, rural area, you go to a hospital. The hospital system is now in crisis. It's massively overwhelmed, overloaded, and this coronavirus has really pushed that whole system over the edge, which is now a huge political problem.
And for those people who are wondering what happened to that 7-year-old boy, after you wrote a story about it for the Wall Street Journal, you raised enough money to get him the help that he needs, and he's now in college, which is wonderful to have that happy ending. I do have to wonder, based on what you're saying, that there are elements of that healthcare system that are the same as the one today. How much do you think we might be underestimating the anger being felt among the public about the response to the coronavirus, about the ability for for hospitals to care for other people who are sick outside of the coronavirus right now?
Well, look, healthcare anywhere in the world is a hugely sensitive, politically sensitive topic, but even more so in China, where the Communist Party, really a central pillar and anchor of its legitimacy and credibility, is its ability to deliver healthcare to the population. So, this goes back to 1949 when the Communist Party took over China. At that point, it was the sick man of Asia, as it was called, and the party actually quite literally nursed China back to health, mobilized armies of so-called barefoot doctors who went out into the countryside, basic intervention, education on hygiene. As a result of that, life expectancy jumped, infant mortality declined, and pretty much the whole population of China had some kind of health care. Now, the problem emerged in the 1980s when China dismantled people's communes in the countryside, and they closed down thousands of state-owned enterprises in the cities, and these were the primary vehicles for delivering healthcare in China, and nothing replaced it. They're just now rebuilding that system. The problem they have now is they're far from having rebuilt it, satisfactorily. And right now, China is suffering from all the problems of rich countries. So, it's not infectious diseases now that, China is battling. It's chronic diseases, diabetes, cancer, stroke, and so on. That's their problem.
Just 30 seconds. How does the U.S. system compare to theirs, given the fact that it's currently preparing for the virus to come here?
Well, this of course is the real tragedy that China is growing old, as they say, before it's grown rich. So you've now got all of the problems of a rich country in a country which is still battling poverty. So you cannot compare these healthcare systems across the board, even though, for instance, in Beijing, the healthcare system in the Chinese capital is about as good as it is in California. Nationwide, the Chinese healthcare system is still pretty rudimentary.
Andy Brown, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I mean, Andy's perspective is always just so interesting.
Yeah,
gives us a sense of what's really going on.
His column was emotional for me. As somebody who has an 8-year-old son, it was emotional. Andy Brown, editorial director for Bloomberg New Economy, joining us here in our interactive broker studios. But it really raises a question from an economic perspective. President Xi Jinping and his power, he is being called into question by some people about his response and some of the anger. And that is something that I don't have a good handle on, I've got to be honest, as far as how much that is. Coming up, we're going to talk more about what to expect from the U.S. consumer, earnings from Macy's, Home Depot, and beyond. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Coronavirus fears weighing heavily on the market. Stocks are lower following yesterday's sell-off that wiped out most global equity gains for the year. The loss is led by declines in energy, material, and financial shares. Analysts at Oxford Economics said the epidemic could wipe more than $1 trillion from the global economy. Home Depot rebounded from a string of disappointing results with a fourth quarter that topped analyst projections. Same-store sales gained 5.2% last quarter. HP is trying to rally investors against Xerox's hostile takeover bid. The PC maker will return $16 billion to shareholders. Most of that will come through buybacks. Executives say they have now engaged Xerox to discuss a possible combination on their own terms. And in a break with past practice, Netflix said it will begin listing its most popular shows and movies. The list will be updated daily. It's been testing the feature in Mexico and the UK and said members have found it useful. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news.
I'm Peter Jones. Lifting business performance is critical in today's uncertain times. But how do you keep up with changing regulations and rising demands? How do you break free from manual processes to raise productivity? The answer is technology that elevates performance and comes with industry-leading support. Over 1 million UK businesses, including my investment group, trust Sage to manage their finances, operations and people.
Elevate your business today with our free performance review. Visit sage.com/perform.
What am I saving for? My passion. Food photography.
I trained to be a landscape garden designer.
Open a food stall and sell my famous fish tacos.
I go to stuntman school.
I'd be a wedding planner. I'd start a dog grooming business. Sorry, we'd start a dog grooming business.
What are you waiting for? Make your one day happen with a Fidelity Stocks and Shares ISA. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules may change. Full terms for our Stocks and Shares ISA are available on our website, 18 plus UK residents.
It's not always obvious, but 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. So if we're sitting in the priority seats on the bus or train, lost in our books or wrapped up in the latest box set, let's not forget about the people we share our journeys with. Let's pop out of our shells every now and then and ask if someone needs that seat more than us. Remember, it's everyone's journey.
Are you sitting comfortably? Is your roof cascading light in the space around you? Loving that feeling as you glide over a bumpy road? If you are, you're most certainly experiencing the advanced comfort of a Citroën SUV. If you're not, take one for a comfort drive. A test drive, but way more comfortable. Citroën C3 Aircross and C5 Aircross SUV range. Now is £500 off list price and 3 year 0% APR finance. Ooh la la! Citroën. Citroën UK Limited, acting as a credit broker, not a lender. Conditional sale. Terms, eligibility criteria and conditions apply. Guarantee may be required. PSA Finance UK Limited, participating dealer stock vehicles ordered between the 3rd and the 29th of February and registered by 31st of March.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, retail earnings continue. We'll get the latest on Home Depot and Macy's. Plus, we're going to speak with retired Navy Admiral James Stavridis, former military commander of NATO. We're going to discuss the vulnerability of the 2020 U.S. presidential campaigns and elections. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Well, thank you, Paul. We opened positive and felt good for a little while. Then the S&P turned lower in the wake of its largest loss in 2 years yesterday. Energy, material, and financial shares have been leading the declines. 10-year Treasury yields resumed a push to near record low levels. Ian Shepherdson of Pantheon Macroeconomics tells Bloomberg the Fed is not ready to pull the trigger, but that could change in a hurry.
I think that the Fed is not at the point yet where they're going to pull the trigger to take sort of a precautionary action. But yeah, it could happen. I mean, I think the thing we all got to admit here is how much we don't know.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down over 1% again, down 1.1%, down 34. The Dow's down over 1%, down 297. Make that 300. The NASDAQ is down 1.1%, down 106. The 10-year is up 11/30 seconds with a yield of 1.33%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.3% at $50.75 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 1.6% at $16.49.50 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 110.13. The euro $1.877, and the British pound $1.30.08. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We are seeing the declines hold steady with the NASDAQ down 1.1%, as Greg Jarrett mentioned. One stock that is not falling is Home Depot, although off its earlier highs, up now only 1.3% after beating estimates. And we want to dig into whether this is simply an interest rate story that has given a boost to the housing market, or if there is a message that we can take about the broader consumer, and we'll wrap in Macy's as well. Joining us now to help do that is Craig Johnson, President of Customer Growth Partners. Craig, I want to start with Home Depot. The shares off earlier highs, but still positive, which is remarkable on a day like today. How much do you think the story here is interest rates, and how much is this organic demand for housing?
Well, this is the two companies reporting today are iconic names in retail, but they're clearly going in different directions. Home Depot, we think the interest rate element is a part of the picture, but the more important thing is the changing and improving fundamentals in the housing market is the big driver. And the two key metrics we look at is home pricing and then home turnover, existing home turnover. And both of those are up. Prices are up 6.8% year over year at the latest read, and home turnover is up over 9%, about 9.5%. Those are exceptionally good numbers and represent a sequential improvement over each of the last couple of months. And it's those two factors, expectations of rising prices and secondly, rising home turnover, those are the key triggers to spending in terms of home improvement. And that's what we think is driving the Home Depot performance.
All right, Craig, let's switch gears to Macy's. Another tough quarter. Stocks off 3.5% here. The stock's down 12% for this year and 35% over the past 12 months here. So it kind of goes back to that conundrum for these department stores led by the iconic name Macy's. What can they do to survive?
Well, Macy's challenge, and this is true across department store retail, is there's lagging organic growth in the overall concept of a department store, which really the format hasn't really changed that much from when R.H. Macy and Marshall Field created the concept 170 years ago. And the demand for department store shopping is simply down by the range of about 1% year over year. And so we look at what's happening is a decline in market share of department stores down to 1%, a decline of 1%. And what we're seeing is that Macy's is trying to catch up. They have this new operational Polaris concept where it tries to cut its costs and reduce capacity so it matches the supply with demand. And so it's announced cutting of stores. The question is, it's done this it's $1 late and $1 short.
We take any broader takeaway from data that we've been getting out of Macy's, not maybe Home Depot because that's a particular story, but Macy's and some of the other retailers about the state of the U.S. consumer?
Well, we think the underlying state of the U.S. consumer is essentially healthy. The challenge for department stores is that's a segment of the market it's in decline, and it's been in decline for a full generation. You go back to the late 1980s, department stores comprised a full 10% of the retail market. Now it's down to 1.1%. It's exceptional. So you don't want to estimate the number coming out of just Macy's. So we look at the overall picture, and we just issued our annual forecast for 2020, and the overall forecast calls for growth of 4.1%, which is quite good, not stellar, but quite good. But you look at the department store sector, and we're forecasting that it's down about 1% decline.
So, Craig, given that backdrop, that outlook, one of the concepts that I'm fascinated with is the concept of the U.S. is still overstored, despite the fact that we see Macy's and others closing stores. By what magnitude do you think the industry still has to shrink its physical footprint?
We're guessing for the department store sector by about another 20%. This is a large number. It's simply the sector is still way over capacity. There's a lot of stores that you don't need. There's markets in the country you don't need 10 stores in many major metropolitan areas. You can get by with 5, 6, 7. And same thing in smaller to mid-sized markets. You don't need the number of stores because the demand simply isn't there. And in Macy's case, just like the other department stores, you have too many retail square feet chasing too few customer feet. And that's the core problem.
Got it.
And it's exacerbated as online grows, which keeps growing year after year.
Yep. Craig Johnson, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts here on all things retail. Some numbers out of Home Depot and Macy's today as the retailers wrap up their quarterly earnings season. Craig Johnson, President, Customer Growth Partners, on the phone from New Canaan, Connecticut. Just giving you a data check here. S&P down about 33 points here. The Dow off 283. That's both of those are about 1% even declines. NASDAQ also down about 1%, 94. That puts the Dow Jones, just to give you a number, around number 27,675 there, down 286. Treasury market, bond market, looking at the 10-year Treasury up 12.30 seconds. The yield now on the 10-year Treasury down at 133. It was a low of about 131 earlier in the day. The 2 years at 1.20% on the 2 year. Looking at, again, at continued weakness in crude. WTI crude off 1.8% to $50.50 a barrel. Continues to test that $50 support there. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
All right, Paul, thanks. The Centers for Disease Control says the coronavirus is rapidly evolving and expanding. That says the disease shows signs of accelerating outside China. Close to 1,000 cases now reported in South Korea, nearly 300 in Italy, 15 deaths in Iran, and the first infection reported in Switzerland this morning. President Trump says the U.S. has it under control. So does China's Xi Jinping.
He is very capable. The country is very capable. And it snuck up on him, but I think he's going to do Well,
speaking from India, the president said he's asking for $2.5 billion in emergency coronavirus funds. Democrats, including Senator Patty Murray, say that's not enough.
I am very concerned that we are not prepared for this or for anything like it in the future, especially with the budget that came out that cut CDC, that cut NIH, where we're seeing firsthand right now why it's so important that we're prepared.
The Washington Post reports the U.S. has only tested 426 people for the virus because a kit sent to states from the Centers for Disease Control had a faulty component. Tonight is the last Democratic primary debate before Super Tuesday, and Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports it could be frontrunner Bernie Sanders' biggest test.
Former Deputy Chief of Staff to the Obama administration Jim Messina tells Bloomberg News that while last week's debate was all about Michael Bloomberg, this debate will likely be all about Bernie Sanders.
Everyone is going to come after him because it's in their best political interest. You know, if I'm Mayor Bloomberg, I'm going to take the fight to Bernie a little bit.
Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Radio will carry the debate live in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Mary?
So I know it's tempting to pour used cooking oil straight down the sink, but I spoke to the local council and they said the best way to get rid of oil or fat is to collect it, once it's cooled down, of course, in a used container. And then you can scoop it out and put it in the bin.
Cooking oils and fats block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
It's a new day. Grab the bull by the horns of ambition. There's two U's in future. Which do you want to be?
Or leave the motivation to Vitality. With our health insurance, you could get the Apple Watch Series 5 to help set your goals. From just £99 up front with nothing more to pay if you stay active. Search Vitality Apple Watch. Life's better with Vitality. Upfront payment varies starting from £99, 18 plus selected models only. 24-month credit agreement, variable direct debit. Available on certain Vitality plans, minimum premiums, terms and exclusions apply.
Taking it for a spin has changed. Giving it a whirl has changed.
With £500 towards a qualifying new Vauxhall with 4.9% APR representative when you take a test drive, the rules have changed. Book your test drive this weekend. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. Allowance provided as deposit contribution on qualifying new Vauxhalls. Conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status. T's and C's. 18 plus Vauxhall Finance. Registered by 2nd of April 2020. Search Try Your New Vauxhall.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Explore to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down. The S&P is now on pace for its biggest four-day slump since December of 2018. Investors are looking at the latest coronavirus news. Treasuries are up. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down just about 1%, down 31. The Dow's down over 1%, down 285. And the NASDAQ is down 1%, down 88. The 10-year is up 10.30 seconds. The yield is 1.33%. West Texas Intermediate Crude is down 1.7% at $50.57 a barrel, while COMEX Gold is down 1.7% at $16.4770 an ounce. The dollar yen, 110.18. The euro, $1.874. The British pound, $1.3006. Sources say a settlement of almost $50 billion proposed by opioid makers and distributors is drawing more support from states, including California and New York, as the companies try to make a deal before the trial in New York next month. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the 2020 presidential election is ramping up, and the concern remains from 2016 about the vulnerability of the campaigns and of the election itself to outside influences, most notably, certainly from 2016, from Russia. To get a sense of kind of where we are today versus 2016, we welcome Admiral James Stavridis. He's a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, retired U.S. Navy admiral, and, of course, former military commander of NATO. Admiral Stavridis, thank you so much for joining us. We know you are busy. Let's start with the presidential election. clear evidence that the 2016 election was influenced, was hacked by the Russians. Is that risk still there today?
100%. And the entire U.S. intelligence community, all 17 elements of it, have attested to that in front of Congress, most recently in a somewhat controversial briefing. It is clearly a threat, and I'll give you three quick things we got to focus on. One is local manipulation, actually going in and trying to work on balloting procedures. This is perhaps the most undefended portion of this. That won't be manifest until November, of course. Number two is going after the campaigns the way the Russians did in 2016, getting into emails, revealing insider detail to embarrass and deter campaigns. And then number three, what you alluded to, Paul, attempting to influence the campaigns by getting on social media, social networks, creating bots that drive social media campaigns. So there are layer upon layer of ways in which Russia can, and I would suspect will, try and attack these elections.
Admiral, given your experience within the military and the security forces all around, how good is our defense to these types of attacks now compared to 2016?
Lisa, I wish I could say it's much, much better. I cannot. I would say that we are somewhat better because our technology and our tools coming out of the National Security Agency, NSA, are better. Our big banks, our financials, our telecom have improved. And then thirdly, a plus is that we're more aware of the threat than we were in 2016. But having said all of that, I would say our defenses are a C plus at best. I wouldn't say they are going to get us an A or even a B. And, you know, in elections, that's our democracy. You only want to get an A grade on the conduct of your democracy.
So, Admiral, one of the things that's been a theme for the Trump administration is generally not supportive of major parts of our intelligence community and apparatus, and constant attacks on individuals as well as the entities themselves. Has that position by the administration materially weakened U.S. defenses as it relates to kind of cybersecurity and just overall intelligence support?
It has, unfortunately, and it manifests in two different ways, Paul. One is internally, it's extremely discouraging to the intelligence community when they're denigrated. I alluded a moment ago to a briefing done behind closed doors, classified briefing up on the Hill, conducted by the intelligence community about concerns of the election coming forward. This was attacked by the president. That's not helpful. If the president has views on this, he ought to get behind closed doors with the intelligence community, but it starts to buckle the morale inside the intelligence community when they perceive they're being attacked by the commander-in-chief. And then secondly, our allies, our partners, and our friends are watching this, and even worse, the Russians are watching this, and the Chinese, and the Iranians, and the North Koreans, and it gives them more license, more optimism that they can intrude in these elections if they see a split between the executive branch and the intelligence community itself. So not helpful. I wish the president would take his concerns, which may be legitimate at times, do it behind closed doors. Don't do it in a way that reveals these kind of divisions.
Admiral, I want to just broaden out here. We have certainly the election coming up this November. The Democratic debate will be held tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. But on a broader level, I'm wondering about the U.S.'s alliances right now, especially as we head toward potentially a more disruptive period of time from a health perspective or an economic perspective. How close is the U.S. to its allies versus, say, 2 years ago?
We have drifted away from some of our allies, most notably our European allies and NATO. That creaking sound you hear from time to time, Lisa, is the transatlantic bridge, which is under a lot of stress and strain as between the United States on one side and NATO on the other. I think, in fairness, we're still very, very close to the Israelis, to the Saudis. We're quite close with the Japanese. Our South Korean alliance has had some stresses. I think the one I worry about the most is that U.S.-European relationship, because the Europeans matter. Collectively, that's the largest economy in the world, the European Union. Now, with Great Britain leaving it, it's somewhat smaller than it was, but it's still an enormous economic and military capability. So as we look at challenges around the world, the military ones, certainly the cyber ones, and you're absolutely correct, if this coronavirus continues to accelerate, we're going to need all hands on deck globally to deal with it. It's not a good time to be drifting away from our principal pool of allies, partners, and friends, and that's Europe.
Admiral, just quickly, on the election, simple question: why hasn't the U.S. improved its election security? It just seems like it wouldn't be that difficult.
I think the simple answer to the question is because it is bifurcated between different elements of governance. So there are municipal and local elements, there are state elements, there are national elements to it. And then secondly, a continuing flaw in the U.S. government is our interagency still does not work together as well as it should. Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, National Security Agency. We haven't found a way to collectively bring them together. Last point, we have nobody in the cabinet of the United States who focuses on cybersecurity. We have a Department of Agriculture. I'm sure that's useful, but we need a focus at the cabinet level that can bring all these stovepipes together. That's what's lacking, Paul.
Admiral James Stavridis, thank you so much for being with us. Columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, a retired U.S. Navy admiral and former military commander of NATO, joining us. He's also the author of a book that was out last year, Sailing True North, 10 Admirals and the Voyage of Character. Dean Emeritus also of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Right now in the markets, you're seeing some of the indexes claw back some of the losses from earlier, still though deeply in the red. The Dow down 0.9%, same as the S&P, with the Nasdaq down 0.7%. In the bond market, the direction is clear. Yields lower, price higher as investors prepare for a lower growth world. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
Pancake Day is flipping fun. Pancake Day is stellar. This day will be a yummy one.
'Cause pancakes love Nutella. Gather friends and family to enjoy some delicious pancakes today. And don't forget, pancakes love Nutella.
The government and the NHS are prepared to deal with coronavirus. You can help too. The best way to protect yourself and others is to wash your hands with soap and water or use a sanitizer gel regularly throughout the day. Catch your cough or sneeze in a tissue, bin it, and wash your hands. If you have recently arrived back from specified areas, follow the returning traveller advice. Check the list of areas and find out more at nhs.uk/coronavirus.
Do you go on the same holiday every year? To the same country, in the same hotel, with the same sea view, visit the same ancient monuments, lay by the same dolphin-shaped pool, meet the same Barrys and Sandras, and wear the same Hawaiian shirt that you'd never wear at home? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From from Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide. I'm David Weston. Welcome now to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. On the brief today, Rishad Salamat in Hong Kong on the spread of the coronavirus. Gina Mountain Adams here in New York on what the virus may mean for corporate earnings. And from Washington, Wendy Benjaminson on who will be in the spotlight at tonight's Democratic presidential debate. So we want to go first to Hong Kong. And first, Rishad, as we lead into this, let me lay out what President Trump says, which is basically Beijing's got it under control. This is what he said earlier today in India.
But I've spoken to President Xi, and they're working very hard. And if you know anything about him, I think he'll be in pretty good shape. They've had a rough patch, and I think right now they have it. It looks like they're getting it under control more and more.
So, Rishad, they say it looks like they're getting it under control. Does it look that way from where you stand?
Well, are they getting it under control at the moment? Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, coming out earlier suggesting that if it hadn't been for the information suppression by China in the first place, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in now. We're talking about Austria now, Italy, of course, with something like 50,000 people under lockdown, and a Spanish island of Tenerife. We've got 1,000 people in a hotel locked up there as well, though they're saying it's not formally a quarantine. Don't forget Iran, 15 deaths. Now, biggest cluster of deaths outside of China. Also getting reports possibly an infection in Switzerland. And don't forget South Korea. This is what's going on at the moment. So it's about containment. People are trying their best to do this. The latest to come into this, United Arab Emirates, and also Turkey banning flights to Iran. That's something that they're doing as well. Of course, this is going to have a huge toll when it comes to the global economy. We had the IMF, Gita Gopinath, their chief economist, suggesting that we'll get a shaving of about 0.1% growth this year. But then you take a look at somebody like UBS's chairman, Axel Weber. He's suggesting in this quarter we could actually see the Chinese economy shrink. And he's talking about a global economy in the same time frame, going from 3.5% growth to just 0.5%. So this is where we are at the moment. And, I just did mention what's going on in some of those countries. South Korea, we have 977 people infected there currently. And, the thing is, they've seen their consumer confidence numbers. They were out for this month, and they've fallen off a cliff. They're actually down to the lowest in 5 years. And that's when we had the last coronavirus there, which is, of course, the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. So, there's all to play for here. And just going back to Italy, this lockdown there, it represents 22% of that country's GDP. That's how much economic activity is and could be stifled as a result of what's happening there. Now, what can people do about it? We've got economists suggesting that we could see something like 205 basis points of cuts from the 7 biggest central banks in the world. Question is, would 25 basis points make a difference here, David? After all, people are fearing for their lives. People are very, very frightened. Will they go out and shop? Will they use that interest rate cut for any benefit? Well, the jury's out, certainly on that.
Yeah, Rishad Salamat, thank you for that comprehensive, if sobering, report on where we are on the coronavirus, reporting from Hong Kong. And now let's come to Gina Martin Adams. And Gina, of course, first and foremost, this is a human tragedy. We never want to forget that. But we're starting to see it now, perhaps hitting some corporations in their earnings forecast.
Yeah, I think that corporates have been very slow to give us a whole lot of information because, like the rest of the world, sort of anticipating the effects of this when we don't even know what the duration of it are is very, very difficult. Nonetheless, you have a handful of companies, less than 30 S&P 500 companies have actually given us guidance. Obviously, the vast majority of those are negative. I think the better way to think about it really is in analyst revisions where we're seeing the most activity. So analysts are attempting to get a sense of what is the real impact here. And more than 300 companies in the S&P 500 have recorded downward revisions to their first quarter estimates. So we've gone from an anticipation of about 2.5% growth on Q1 to negative growth expected already. I think that's only going to get a little bit worse as long as the coronavirus sort of continues to extend, the duration extends, and it continues to ramp up globally. I think the most sort of damaging impact to the markets of the downward revisions has not just been Q1, but the fact that analysts are now reassessing the outlook for Q2, for Q3, and for the year as a whole. And finally, we're seeing the markets kind of capitulate to the idea that some of the income lost is not going to be made up for in the second half of the year. And that's reflected in the 2020 estimate, which is now going downward.
And it raises questions, for example, in the tech sector, where there will see changes in supply chains and things like that that might have longer-term effects on their business.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting in the tech sector, especially in the semiconductor space. I was speaking to our analyst, Anand Srinivasan, this morning on this, and he was talking about sort of Q1 is generally lost time in the semiconductor spaces anyway. Well, you really need to to see is a ramp up in production occur come March, April in anticipation of the third quarter order flow, which really feeds through to fourth quarter holiday seasonality. So you're going to see a lot of seasonal issues in tech. I think the bigger devastation right now is frankly on earnings in the consumer discretionary and the industrial space, where you have real loss of sales that will not be made up for in the second half. And that's where you're seeing the greatest price action with respect to coronavirus, and I think that'll continue.
Yeah, and as you suggest, it's not clear we found bottom yet.
Correct. Absolutely. I don't think we have found bottom because companies are just starting to guide, and we've been through fourth quarter where analysts were trying to sort of assess what the fourth quarter looked like. Now we're starting to focus going forward.
Okay, Gina, thank you so very much. That's Gina Martin-Adams reporting here in New York. And now let's go to Washington and Wendy Benjaminson, because there is a big debate tonight, Wendy. The spotlight last time, I think it's fair to say, was on Michael Bloomberg. He is, of course, the founder, majority owner of our parent company, Bloomberg LP. Where's it going to be tonight?
Well, I think the focus might continue to be a little bit on Michael Bloomberg. I certainly don't think Elizabeth Warren is going to let up for a moment. She raised something like $7 million after the debate last week. But I do think that the field will likely turn to Bernie Sanders. He has now won the popular vote in Iowa. He won the New Hampshire primary. He won the Nevada caucuses very well. He is favored to win in California on Super Tuesday. He's doing well in South Carolina, which has its primary on Saturday. And so if there is a Stop Bernie movement, it will be on the stage tonight.
But it's something we haven't seen yet, Wendy, interestingly. Even though he was the front runner before, we haven't seen them really go after Bernie Sanders. Do we think that other people will join with something that we've heard from the Bloomberg camp they want to do, which is turn the spotlight onto Bernie Sanders? Is it possible for the rest of them to get behind that movement?
They may. I don't think they would consider it getting behind that movement, but yes, absolutely. Michael Bloomberg has made it absolutely clear that he is turning all of his firepower on Bernie Sanders, that he has to stop Bernie Sanders. He firmly doesn't, his campaign says he doesn't believe that Bernie Sanders can beat Donald Trump. The others probably will too, because they need to cut him down a little bit in order for them to gain enough delegates to keep going beyond Super Tuesday, which is going to be very difficult. However, the centrists also need to sort of keep cutting down Michael Bloomberg so that his spending advantage is decreased a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds like that circular firing squad again, potentially.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does.
Okay, thank you so much to Wendy Benjamin. She's our political editor reporting today from Washington. And now it's time to find out how the markets are reacting to today's top stories. And joining us once again is Abigail Doolittle. Well, the markets are down. The equity markets are down again. Is it coronavirus again?
Once again, coronavirus. And it's a little bit more bearish than the declines might suggest. We're down about 1%. That is pretty bearish. But what makes it a little bit more bearish than that on first glance is the fact that on the open, we were actually higher. At one point, the stocks, that chip index, up 1.3%. Now we're looking at pretty decent declines, the fourth down day in a row. So this actually really started on Friday with that PMI miss on the services side, the idea that the coronavirus is bleeding into the economy here in the U.S. And as you were just talking about with Gina Martin-Adams and what we are always talking about, will it affect the corporate profit outlook? The answer is yes, but still it's not quantifiable. So as this happens, investors selling stocks and key technical levels simply being sliced through moving averages, the bears probably are going to take stocks down even more.
It strikes me there's also some risk in lumping it all together under coronavirus. Yesterday you pointed out that in fact health insurers got hit worse than the rest of the people did. There was some differentiation. There are some other things going on in the marketplace besides just the coronavirus. We might miss those other things.
Well, when you have this sort of a sell-off, and it's the degree of which we had yesterday, it wasn't panic, but it was the worst day that we had in 2 years. You tend to miss the smaller stories because folks simply want out, and that's what we saw. So we have stocks down in a big way, bonds up in a big way, the yen up. That was really the focus. So these smaller side stories get lost in that shuffle as investors seek safety and to get chips off the table, essentially.
Abigail Doolittle, thank you so much for reporting on the markets. And now it's time to go to Mark Crumpton for Bloomberg First Word News.
David, Congress is expected to grill U.S. health officials this week on the coronavirus outbreak and what the United States is doing to prevent the virus from taking hold here. The White House has asked Congress for $2.5 billion to battle the disease. Bloomberg has learned that some officials feel the U.S. response hasn't been aggressive enough, while others worry that placing too many restrictions could hurt the U.S. economy. President Trump is optimistic there will be a deal with the Taliban to formally end the war in Afghanistan. The president spoke at a news conference in New Delhi.
We're pretty close. We'll see what's going on. We've got 2 days now under our belt. without violence, or I guess a minimum of violence.
American and Taliban leaders plan to sign a peace deal Saturday. That's if a week-long reduction in violence that began last Saturday stays in place. In India, a new citizenship law that excludes Muslims has triggered more violence. Hindus carrying pickaxes and iron tools hurled rocks at Muslims in New Delhi today. Yesterday, at least 7 people were killed, more than 100 others were injured. India has been racked by violence since Parliament approved a new citizenship law in December that provides fast-track naturalization for some foreign-born religious minorities, but not for Muslims. Former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak is dead. He was 91. Mubarak ruled for 30 years before being forced out of office by the Arab Spring uprising in 2011. He went on trial for the killing of more than 850 protesters by his security forces. Mubarak was only found guilty of fraud. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, triggered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Coming up, we're going to go live to Charleston, South Carolina for a preview of tonight's big debate. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Discover Cork with Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning scenery. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
I'm Peter Jones. Lifting business performance is critical in today's uncertain times. But how do you keep up with changing regulations and rising demands? How do you break free from manual processes to raise productivity? The answer is technology that elevates performance and comes with industry-leading support. Over 1 million UK businesses, including my investment group, trust Sage to manage their finances, operations and people.
Elevate your business today with our free performance review. Visit sage.com/perform.
What am I saving for? My passion. Food photography.
I'd train to be a landscape garden designer.
Open a food store and sell my famous fish tacos.
I'd go to stuntman school.
I'd be a wedding planner.
I'd start a dog grooming business. Sorry, we'd start a dog grooming business.
What are you waiting for? Make your one day happen with a Fidelity Stocks and Shares ISA. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules may change. Full terms for our Stocks and Shares ISA are available on our website. 18 plus UK residents.
It's not always obvious, but 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. So if we're sitting in the priority seats on the bus or train, lost in our books or wrapped up in the latest box set, let's not forget about the people we share our journeys with. Let's pop out of our shells every now and then and ask if someone needs that seat more than us. Remember, it's everyone's journey.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Charleston, South Carolina, ahead of the state's primary coming up this Saturday. And our very own chief Washington correspondent, Kevin Cirilli, is on the scene in Charleston, and this is what's coming up. Tell us all about it, Kevin. What should we be looking for?
A lot of fire against Senator Bernie Sanders, who now assumed his official frontrunner status after winning over the weekend in the Nevada caucus. Expect many of the campaigns to specifically target him and comments that he made as it relates to Cuban's Fidel Castro. Beyond that, former Vice President Joe Biden really saying that his campaign is putting all of their money in South Carolina, being bolstered, he hopes, in part by the large African-American community here that he feels will back his campaign ahead of that contest this weekend. And that's just a couple of days before Super Tuesday. So this is really the final pitch that many of the campaigns will have to make their pitch to voters. And one more word about Bernie Sanders. Last night in the CNN town hall, he was asked point blank, if he doesn't receive the 1991 delegates that are needed to officially clinch the Democratic nomination, would he still feel, if he leads in delegates, that he deserves to be the nominee? He said that if he gets a quote-unquote plurality of delegates, he feels that that person should in fact be the Democratic nominee. So already some jockeying about that specific 1991 number, David, as it relates to delegates.
Son of a gun. Okay, thanks so much to Kevin Cirilli reporting from Charleston. And a reminder, Bloomberg Radio will have full coverage of the debate with Kevin hosting coming up this evening. For more on tonight's debate, we welcome now our political panel of Amy Tarkanian. She's former chairwoman of the Nevada State Republican Party, and Basil Smikle, former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party. So welcome, both of you. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Basil, let me start with you. What are you expecting to look for out of that debate tonight, and how critical is it that Joe Biden show up?
Well, it's essentially do or die for Joe Biden. Yeah. I think if he doesn't win South Carolina, he is significantly hobbled going into Super Tuesday on a day when two of the most delegate-rich states in the country will vote, California and Texas, which Bernie Sanders is projected to win largely because of their Latino population and his support there. So I think Joe Biden has to win the debate tonight. He has to win in South Carolina. But the truth is, I think all eyes are going to be on Bernie Sanders. He's the front runner now. So I think, and you even heard Pete Buttigieg after the Nevada caucuses spend most of his speech talking about Bernie Sanders. So I do think you'll see a lot of attacks on him. I think Mike Bloomberg, my guess is that he'll have a better debate than he did last week, but I think Bernie Sanders is going to be the focus of a lot of attention.
We'll come back to Mike Bloomberg in a minute, but let's talk about Bernie Sanders just for a minute. Bernie Sanders is talking about Bernie Sanders, and he's not backing off some of his positions. For example, on Fidel Castro, this is part of what he said.
We're very opposed to the authoritarian nature of Cuba. But, it's unfair to simply say everything is bad. When Fidel Castro came into office, you know what he did? He had a massive literacy program. Is that a bad thing?
So he taught a lot of people how to read. That's on 60 Minutes from CBS. I mean, at the same time, he doesn't seem to be more vulnerable for taking these positions.
Which is actually terrifying in my opinion. This literacy program that he is claiming that was established underneath Castro is false, because they already had a very high literacy rate and they already had a program in place prior to that regime. This is a man who kills his own people, who puts his own people into concentration camps, so to speak. These are people who literally make maybe $300 a year. I don't think that we would be seeing people trying to escape in rafts by the droves if this was such a wonderful environment.
But that doesn't seem to bother many Democratic voters, Basil. They're voting for him.
Listen, we can have a long conversation about Cuba, but the truth is there are a lot of voters that are going to look past it because whatever remarks he made took place a long time ago. Even Barack Obama tries to normalize relations with Cuba. So there is a more robust conversation that folks need to have about it. That said, I do think he needs to talk more about how he's going to pay for the policies that he's proposing. On the other side, the energy that he's getting is largely because of what he's proposing. He wants health care for everybody. He wants to make college affordable for everybody. Who's going to be against that? But he's got to talk about how he's going to do it. That's what's more important. And just very quickly, specifically to Cuba, I think Joe Biden said that he'll probably lose Florida as a result of that. That actually is a little concerning to me in a general election, specifically. But, nobody's going to take support away from Bernie Sanders.
Amy, I do want to talk about Michael Bloomberg, who, of course, is the founder and the majority shareholder of our parent company, Bloomberg LP. I think it's fair to say he did not have a good first outing. That may be an understatement.
Very fair to say.
What does he need to do tonight?
Well, I hope that he did his debate prep. He can only go up from his last performance. It was very, very apparent that he did not prepare himself. I think that was maybe a little bit of arrogance on his part to just walk in thinking that it was going to be a cakewalk. If you're going to go up against President Trump, who is quick-witted, very sharp, with the tongue at times, you need to know your issues inside and out. And I'm hoping that tonight it's a little bit more I don't want to say entertaining. It would be entertaining for me to see a repeat of that last debate, but it would be nice to see that he actually did a little bit of homework.
Basil, finally, if it's not going to be Bernie Sanders, if for some reason it's not Bernie Sanders, does some of the moderates have to drop out?
Oh, absolutely. If it's not Bernie, my theory has always been Bernie Sanders and Mike Bloomberg have the money, the motivation, and the operation to go the distance. What's going to have to happen is someone, whether it's President Obama, and I'm not previewing that. I'm just saying it has to be President Obama, the donors, or some of the unions go to these candidates and say, you know what, you all need to drop out. We need to get behind one candidate as an alternative to Bernie Sanders. If it comes to that, some moderate. If it comes to that might be Biden, that might be Mike Bloomberg. I don't know, but. That conversation is going to have to happen sooner rather than later. I thought Amy Klobuchar was going to drop out the other night. It sounded like it.
Nobody seems inclined in that direction, I must say.
I think, first of all, Vice President Biden needs to understand that he's running for president and not for Senate like he announced today. That would be a good start.
It was unfortunate. Okay, many thanks to our political panel, Amy Tarkanian and Basil Smikle. And tune into our special coverage of the Super Tuesday election. That's going to be coming up 1 week from today, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Still ahead, part of our conversation with Mark Calabria. He's director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. This is Bloomberg Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba,
please be done.
Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
A pack needs someone to follow.
It's got to be important for somebody to have a breakout moment.
Don't look now, but they're behind you.
Imports declined 2.8%.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Sources tell us that agreement is expected to include commitments on U.S. intellectual property.
With Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
Could we see that play into the results and the forward guidance?
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now to check on the health of the housing market. We've been talking with the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Mark Calabria. He sat down with Bloomberg's Michael McKee about the future of Fannie and Freddie and more.
So we can, by statute, already fix Fannie and Freddie and release them from conservatorship. We can't fix the basic model. So I have the model I have. I can do what I can to get them back out and try to make sure they don't get back in by being better capitalized. But there's some real fundamental flaws to the model that only Congress can fix.
Will you be going to Congress with proposals to try to get this?
Yes, we will. We will be asking for bigger changes, such as I think that the consumer benefits from competition. You know, I've asked for chartering authority to be able to issue additional charters. This also has the benefit of not ever bringing competition, but it also helps reduce too big to fail. You know, we've got 2 of these entities. We're really dependent on them. If we had 5 or 6 or 7, then any 1 or 2 of them could get in trouble, and you'd be less likely to have to rescue them.
You've talked about reducing risk